Nothing But the Truth. Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa of India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, I'll bring you insights and clarity on a major topical issue that matters to you without holding back on the truth. Next month, the Election Commission of India will announce the schedule for the 2024 general election across the country. It will be without doubt the world's biggest festival of democracy. Unfortunately, it has also become one of the most highly expensive exercises for holding elections anywhere in the world. On February 15th, in a landmark judgment, the Supreme Court of India has sent out a stern warning to the Election Commission of India and the central government to correct the anomalies and unfairness that had arisen in the past 5 years in election funding. The Supreme Court struck down the electoral bond schemes introduced by the Modi government in 2017 and said it was unconstitutional. The electoral bonds was one of the major schemes to permit mainly business houses to anonymously donate funds to political parties to fight elections. So in this episode of Nothing But the Truth, we will examine the entire issue of collection of election funds by political parties in India, why the Supreme Court verdict is a significant development, and what we need to do to clean up the entire process of elections. And of course, ensure and to make them transparent and accountable and to reduce corruption. To understand the significance of the recent Supreme Court verdict on electoral bonds, let us first look at the situation that prevailed before these were introduced in 2017. The Election Commission of India, or ECI, is tasked by the Constitution of India to ensure that all political elections that are held in India, whether central, state, or local bodies, are conducted in a free, fair, and transparent manner. The Commission also regulates all election funding. It lays down limits for funding, monitors it carefully, and punishes those that violate it. Now, before the bond scheme came into play, political parties could receive donations from individuals, registered organizations, corporate groups, and electoral trusts. Parties can also collect funds via membership fees and sale of party literature and merchandise. Cash and anonymous donations of up to Rs 2,000 can be made. Earlier, it was Rs 20,000, but it was lowered to 2,000 in 2017. Political parties will have to annually disclose all cash donations above Rs 2,000, apart from donations through banks and digital payment methods. Since corporate and business houses were the largest donors to political parties, before electoral bonds were brought in, the UPA government in 2013 allowed corporate groups to form what they called electoral trusts. Now, these trusts were done with the sole objective to distribute the contributions received by them to the various political parties that were there. But the names of these trusts had to be declared by the political parties. Corporates had to also follow the limit set on the amount they can donate. They could donate only 7.5% of their average net profits in the past 3 years. Also, from 2016 onwards, the Modi government permitted Indian subsidiaries of foreign companies to donate funds to parties. Both individuals or corporate houses can continue to claim 100% tax deduction for any donation or contribution, and political parties also enjoyed full tax waiver on income from all sources. Now, this was the position before the 2017 the electoral bonds were brought into place by the NDA government headed by Prime Minister Modi. Now, the Election Commission, in the meanwhile, had also laid down limits of how much an individual candidate of a political party could spend on electioneering. Currently, a candidate, and this is the rule that has come in from 2022 onwards, a candidate can spend a maximum of Rs 95 lakh in Lok Sabha constituencies in bigger states and Rs 75 lakhs in smaller states. And for the assembly constituencies, the amounts were Rs 40 lakh for a big assembly constituency and Rs 28 lakh for a smaller one, and these were monitored by the Election Commission. Importantly, and this is what you must note, no limits were placed on the amount that political parties could spend on elections, and this is where all the problems start to happen. But let's get back. One of the things that, despite all these measures that the Election Commission of India had taken in terms of restricting the amount of money, capping it to some extent for the candidates, but no caps with the political parties, The Delhi-based Center for Media Studies, which has been doing regular studies on the election spending, said that in the 2014 general election, that is the first time Prime Minister Modi was elected as Prime Minister, the estimated cost for all the parties, not just the BJP, but all the parties put together, the estimated cost was rupees 30,000 crores. And this was spent, of course, as I mentioned, by all political parties and candidates to fight the elections. So if you divide that by the 543 Lok Sabha seats, the average spent per constituencies was rupees 55 crore. Now remember, the Election Commission had set a limit of 75 lakhs or 70 lakhs in fact at that time for any expenditure for a large Lok Sabha seat. You can imagine the difference, and make no mistake, the amount that this Center of Media Studies had put down of 55 crores per constituency is completely unaccounted for. This is not in the books of any of the political parties or the Election Commission. What they have on their books is what has legally been spent, which is what the Election Commission of India registers in terms of the expenditure per candidate as well as for parties. Now, mind you, this 30,000 crores that I had mentioned does not include the expenses incurred by the Election Commission of India to conduct the elections, which is estimated to be around rupees 4,000 crores. Now, of these 30,000 crores that I mentioned, which is not being spent by the ECI but by political parties, the Media Studies Institute estimates that as much as 66% of the money being used was unaccounted for. Most of these were believed to be done using black money or amounts transferred by check payments to individuals and institutions backing political parties and candidates, of course. And this money was being transferred before the ECI announced the dates for elections to avoid scrutiny by it. Now, this was one of the methods they did. There are plenty of other methods by which experts say that the entire election funding thing is being obfuscated and made completely opaque, and therefore so much money flows in over and above what is being estimated by the Election Commission of India. So in this milieu of various ways that election funding was being abused in many senses, in 2017, the NDA government came up with the Electoral Bonds scheme, claiming that it would make political funding more transparent through the flow of clean cash and would reduce both black money and curb corruption. Now, let's look at the Electoral Bond scheme that was devised by the NDA government. The bond scheme had allowed business houses, institutions, and individuals to buy bonds ranging from rupees 1,000 to rupees 1 crore from the State Bank of India. These bonds were interest-free, tax-exempt, and barring SBI, the State Bank of India, no other entity would know who had bought these bonds. There was also no limit to the amount of bonds that could be bought and the amount of money that could be used to buy them. Now, these bonds could then be deposited to political parties, and the names of the donors would remain anonymous to them. Parties would have to cash these bonds within a stipulated time frame, and as I had mentioned, the identity of the donors would remain anonymous to the political parties itself, and the only people that would know, or the only institution that would know who had donated it, was the State Bank of India, where these industrialists or corporate houses bought the bonds from. Now, the then Union Finance Minister, Arun Jaitley, who's passed away, and who's seen as the chief architect of the Electoral Bond scheme, argued that it would help protect the donors from any retribution from political parties. Now, the reason he said that is that if the political parties did not know who donated these electoral bonds, there would be less pressure on business houses from not only the ruling parties but others to sort of pressurize them and say, give more money or that. This remained absolutely anonymous. The NDA government did one more thing. It also removed the limits placed on corporates from donating, which, if you recall, I'd mentioned was 7.5% of their average net profits. They removed that entire clause, and even if a company was making money or not, it could donate or buy electoral bonds, and it could give as much money as it wanted to without the limit of 7.5% of net profits. Now, if you take a look at the other aspects, one of the things that came up after the electoral bonds were introduced in 2017 were serious concerns, and these were raised by both opposition parties and experts in electoral funding. And firstly, the claim that the government made that the donors would remain anonymous need not hold true. This was the accusation because the SBI, the State Bank of India, was a public sector undertaking and said any ruling dispensation at the center could get to know the donors' names and which party had received the amount. This could enable a ruling party to mount pressure on donors to ensure its opponents are not given any money. The other major concern that was raised was that political parties and business houses could enter into a nexus. They could donate money anonymously for favors granted for sanctioning projects and other transactions. Now, this is called the quid pro quo, where I give a certain sum of money and I am given a favor or given a sanction a project. And because this whole process remains anonymous, the donation remains anonymous, no one can link the two, and therefore this makes it much easier. That was the charge that was brought against the electoral bond. Now, various petitioners brought these complaints to the Supreme Court of India, which began hearing the case, and after a close examination, the 5-judge Constitution bench, headed by Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, struck down the electoral bond scheme and said it was unconstitutional. Now, in a unanimous 232-page verdict, the court held, and I'm describing the real reasons why the court felt that this was unconstitutional, it held that unlimited contribution by companies to political parties was antithetical to the idea of free and fair elections. So the one was unlimited contributions was antithetical to free and fair elections. The second, and this was contiguous to the argument that they made, this was because it allowed certain persons and companies to wield their clout and resources to influence policy making. This, the court said, was violative of the principle of political equality, which is captured in the value of one person, one vote. The judges ruled that the ability of a company to influence the election process through political contribution was much higher than that of any individual. The court also, and very interestingly, ordered the names of the donors of the electoral bonds to be made public by the Election Commission of India by March 13 this year. Now, when those names come out, it would be interesting to see which business houses made the largest contributions to which parties. But if you examine the amounts between March 2018 and July 2023, the total electoral bonds that were sold amounted to rupees 13,814 crores, of which 12,999 crores, or close to 95%, was above rupees 1 crore and purchased largely by corporate houses. So 95% of the electoral bonds were bought by corporate or business houses. Now, if this amount of 13,800 crores or so, of this amount, the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party or BJP received the largest amount, with receiving around 6,500 crores or more, and this was 55% of the total. That's one figure. The Congress followed with rupees 1,123 crores, or 9% of it. Now, after that, it is the regional parties that begin to dominate the bond funding, and the Trinamool Congress topped the regional party list with rupees 1,000 odd crores, or 9% of the total donated. It was followed by the BRS, or the Bharat Rashtra Samiti, that was K. Chandrasekhar Rao's party in Telangana, and that got rupees 913 crores. The Biju Janata Dal, which is of course Odisha, headed by Mr. Naveen Patnaik, got rupees 774 crores. The DMK in Tamil Nadu, rupees 616 crore. The YSRCP, this is in Andhra Pradesh, got 382 crores, and its rival party, TDP, got rupees 146 crores. And the undivided Shiv Sena got rupees 101 crores, and the AAP party, largely based in Delhi, got rupees 94 crores. So in all, as I had mentioned, there was rupees 13,814 crores that political parties had got through electoral bonds in these last 5 years. But this was not the only route that they got it. If you recall, I had mentioned electoral trusts earlier, before the bonds came in, and the electoral trusts continued to receive money from various corporate houses, and they then donated to the parties. Now, the estimate there is also very interesting. In the 5 years between 2017 and 2022, that's the time the bonds were also introduced, electoral trusts donated as much as rupees 3,895 crores. And if you take that as a percentage of what the electoral bonds received, It's about 25% of what the bonds had given to other parties. Now, 85% of that money of the electoral trust money went to the BJP, and that amounted to around rupees 3,300 crores. So if you take what the BJP got from the electoral bonds and as well as from the electoral trust, the BJP alone received rupees 10,000 crores in the past 5 years, starting 2017 onwards, while the Congress got around rupees 1,500 crores. I am not commenting on the amounts and which party received that. I'm just giving you facts so that you could get an idea of what the schemes yielded. But the recent Supreme Court's judgment has once again thrown open the debate on the need for a clean political funding mechanism in India. As mentioned earlier, the declared election expenses of parties and candidates suggested the continued flow of unaccountable or unaccounted for funds or black money into elections. Now, let's take the election funding done in the 2019 general elections. That was just 5 years ago. If you analyze, and I'm sorry to throw figures, but I think it's very, very important to understand this. An analysis by the Association for Democratic Reforms, or ADR, found that every winning contestant in the 2019 Lok Sabha polls spent on an average rupees 58 lakh. That is rupees 12 lakh less than the expenditure cap of rupees 70 lakh per constituency set by the ECI. One set of figures, they spent only 58 lakhs of that 70 lakhs that was permitted. Now, India Today magazine has done a calculation and said that if the losing candidates also spent the same amount, that is rupees 58 lakhs, and there were at that time a total of 8,048 candidates in the fray, that would have amounted to, if you multiplied 58 into this 8,048, it would come to rupees 4,667 crore. So that's one number. The estimated amount, if everybody spent equally at that time for the constituency, the candidates spent rupees 4,600 crores. Then, of course, there is the amount that the parties spend, and it was in 2019, it was declared that the 32 national parties and regional parties spent as much as 2,591 crores. This is what they declared. So if you take the two together, the money spent by candidates as well as by by the political parties, it adds up to around rupees 7,000 crore. That is the official estimate that has been given, that in the Lok Sabha 2019 elections, parties and candidates together spent rupees 7,000 crore. Now, this is where the real nub lies. The Center for Media Studies, that, as I told you, does extensive studies on this, had pegged the campaign expenses by parties and candidates at rupees 47,000 crores. And this is excluding the expenses incurred by the Election Commission of India, which was estimated to be around 8,000 crores. So therefore, the question to ask is, where did the remaining rupees 40,000 crores come from? Remember, 47,000 crores is what the Center for Media Studies estimates. The official figure is 7,000 crores only, 7,000 crore rupees. So where did this 40,000 crores come from? Now, again, the income from such unknown sources, accounted for 66% of the funds of political parties in 2014. And now that has jumped to 72% by 2022, even though the electoral bonds replaced cash. So the difference now is that 66% in 2014 was unaccounted for. In 2019, that moved to 72% of the total electoral funds that were spent was unaccounted for. Unfortunately, there is still no mechanism to trace the sources of this money, and without doing that, the Indian electoral outcome cannot be thought to be free of the influence of corruption and black money. So this part has to be set right. Now, one of the major sources of unaccounted for money in elections perhaps lies in the very structure of political funding in India, which allows political parties to manipulate their books however they want. Now, when political parties declare an income, a majority of it is shown as donation from unknown sources, be it the sale of coupons, they list it as relief fund, miscellaneous income, voluntary contributions, or contributions from meetings. Now, the details of such voluntary contributors are not made available in the public domain. In fact, most political parties showed a majority of their collected funds as cash receipts of under rupees 20,000, a limit reduced to rupees 2,000 in 2017, as there was no need to name donors who contributed less than that amount. So a large number of parties had resorted to this particular thing, saying that they need not declare who has given it. Most of them had given cash, and many parties had used this. Across the board, parties use this particular technique. It is not only India, let's be clear, that faces the problem of election funding and the way it is being handled. Take the US experience, the world's most powerful democracy. Now, here again, it is a serious reminder of why there should be a cap on the inflow of corporate funds, directly or indirectly. The US Supreme Court, in fact, had prohibited the use of corporate money in elections in 2010. And since then, the US elections have been witnessing a massive surge in what is known as dark money. Now, this has come out of a loophole that was there, and these are anonymous political contributions, because it saw the formation of what are called super political action committees, or super PACs, PACs for political action committees, which are tax-exempt organizations that raise money privately to influence elections or legislation, as the case could be. These super PACs, as they're called, in turn can contribute funds directly into candidates and campaign committees. They can also make what is called independent expenditure, which is unlimited expenditure independent of a party or candidate. Now, in the 2020 presidential elections, in which Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump, the super PACs or PACs accounted for 63% of the $2.6 billion independent expenditure made by political parties. So that is the case of the US, where though the Supreme Court had banned the use of corporate funds, they found ways and means to bring it together, and in fact funding has gone up in those countries. So the other option, often which experts contemplate, is to eliminate corporate influence in elections and abolish private funding altogether, and introduce what is called public funding for political parties. Most exponents say that public finance can help protect the political process from what is called quid pro quo kickbacks or corruption, and create a level playing field for party candidates with less resources and new entrants that are there. So direct funding of political parties, in fact, is practiced in as much as, or as many as 86% of the countries in Europe, 71% in Africa, 63% in the Americas, and 58% in Asia. There are different models of public funding in some countries. Only parties get the funds and not the candidates. In others, it's the reverse. The candidates get the fund and not the parties. But there is a whole lot of models that India could look at to see if they really wanted to remove corporate funding or private funding, what is the kind of public funding that could be used in there. Of course, in India, there is no immediate possibility of public funding of elections. The Election Commission of India is not in favor of it, and it has already told the union government that it will not be able to prohibit or check candidates' expenditure over and above the state's provision. Now, that is because, of course, let's not also forget, we've talked of figures that range from 40,000 crores to 50,000 crores. Which state or which country would like to spend that much on candidates? Clearly, there has to be a reduction of expenses towards elections, and a better system, particularly given technology and everything else, a better system to communicate a party or candidate's campaign to the electorate that's there. One of the major problems continues to be the lack of political will, and that for long has stalled the cleanup of political finance in India. So what does India need to do? There's the option of public finance, which it has to contemplate, and also private finance, because you cannot eliminate that. There is a legitimate need for funding that exists. So what India needs to do is to evolve a system that allows funding of political parties, but which is transparent, open to public scrutiny, with checks and balances to ensure that it is a fair process and there is no quid pro quo. Simultaneously, there must be a concerted drive to ensure that election funding for candidates remain within the limits specified by the Election Commission of India. Of course, this has to be debated widely across India, and there has to be an urgent calling for cleaning up the elections in India and making sure that the funds are not misused, that it is free and fair, and this is something that The next government and across the political spectrum after these elections has to sit and work out. For more details, you can read the in-depth cover story done by my colleague Kaushik Deka in India Today magazine. Thank you for watching this episode of Nothing But the Truth. I look forward to having you with me next week. Nothing but the truth.